obviously, in this community, would like to see certain representation amongst that 9-member body.
And one final question from up here. Just in terms of moving, in terms of what we can do, I mean,
Right.
San Francisco, obviously, this is a bill that our legislators clearly support. So in terms of helping you move this through either appropriations or its continued next steps, how can us here in San Francisco help you in Sacramento?
Well, good point. First and foremost, don't lobby us. We are already on board. You'd be surprised. I say that very specifically because people still lobby us. Don't worry. We are totally on board. We're the authors.
Tell us who
we're good. What I can do is, let me actually do a quick review of the membership of the Appropriations Committee. And what I will do is send that list to you of the appropriate members. But they need to hear loud and clear, not only from this community, but also from medical cannabis communities throughout the state. And I think, to your point, though, when I say legislators, it should be targeted. We will help you target those legislators to make sure there's an effective messaging as far as who you need to speak with.
What about synthetic marijuana?
I had a question. Are there any Republicans at all that you would say are sitting on the fence that we have any chance of getting on AB 2312?
We have one who's not on the fence. We have one who, and I would stretch to call him a Republican. He is a tried and true libertarian. Chris Norby he's in our camp. He is fully in our camp. As far as the other Republican members, quite honestly, I'd have to tell you I'm not so sure that there's any pickings in that camp right there. If there are, we'll certainly let you know, but I'm not even sure there's ones even close to the fence. The fence might be miles away from many members of the Republican Party, so if they seem to be wandering in that direction, they're either lost, right, or something has shifted greatly, but we'll certainly let you know about that. Having said that, the way Sacramento works is, quite honestly, they are, unless it comes down to a revenue measure, they're not relevant. They really aren't. And they know that. And so, the one thing they can do, however, is certainly grandstand on a given issue. I'm sure that they can join with law enforcement to continue to beat that drum. But relative to the actual votes and mechanisms, it is the Democratic Party which is our challenge. Let me repeat that.
DNC.
It is the Democratic Party. It is not Republicans who are the challenge in getting things passed in Sacramento. So I want to make sure that everyone understands that. It's not like Washington, D.C., that it's the Republicans that are blocking things. They're really not, because they're not relevant.
All right. We have time for one more question, and I want to go to someone who hasn't asked in the back there. Yes.
I'm just wondering if you have a sense from being in Sacramento and from the meetings that your boss and others have had with the federal officials, what do they see as U.S. Attorney Melinda Haig's motivations? Do they see her as just a rogue U.S. attorney that's not speaking for the federal government? I mean, how could this be that she seems to be so counter to what we thought Eric Holder's position was? And I'm just wondering what the legislators feel about what she's doing.
I mean, we met with Ms. Haig, and depending upon who you talk to within this community, everyone has an opinion whether or not it's coming straight from the White House and President Obama's pushing the magic button that says enforce, 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 or whether or not it's driven by the U.S. attorneys themselves. If you take at least Ben Wagner and Melinda Haig at face value for what they have said publicly and through their press representatives, I tend to personally, at least from being in the meeting with her, believe that I think a good portion of this was generated by them. That by her and at least Ben Wagner specifically, I mean, out of the 4 U.S. attorneys, the 2 northern U.S. attorneys, Wagner and Haig, are taking a much more aggressive stance than the southern U.S. attorneys. And so I think that while they seem to, all 4 of them, have organized themselves and are coordinating efforts, it's clearly driven by the 2 northern ones. She gave us a whole range of quote-unquote reasons that I'm not so sure are based on anything that we could get to a tangible place around. She said that this all started because she was responding to complaints. We asked if they were specific to any given MCD. She wouldn't answer that question. We've never seen any tracking of the MCD, of the actual complaints. We've never seen any real information about the volume of complaints if they do exist. She intimated to us that her intention was to protect kids from marijuana, and I don't know if that was the general accessibility or availability of marijuana by perception here in San Francisco, or if that's something specific. As many of you know, the MCDs in San Francisco that have received DOJ letters were in full compliance with local law. There were no complaints from SFPD or DPH regarding the MCDs that received DOJ letters, to my understanding. And so when we posed the question to her, what do we tell local MCDs? What should they change? What should they do to avoid receiving a DOJ letter? She essentially said there's nothing that they can do. And then when we asked if we passed the statewide regulation for medical cannabis, would that stop you sending letters to the MCDs? And she said no. So you really end up in a situation where it's very hard to figure out sort of, and we asked her, well, we tried one more, which was, do you have any specific recommendations for things you want to see change? And then she said, well, as a U.S. attorney, I don't give policy recommendations. So it was kind of like chasing a tail around and around. You just could never quite catch it. So it's hard to understand exactly what would happen or what needs to happen or what would satisfy either her or U.S. Attorney Wagner to stop some of their enforcement efforts, especially given the fact that while they say out of one side that they are after those MCDs that are profiteering from this issue, they are actually going after those that are the best models or in complete compliance with local law. So it's not as if they are picking MCDs that everyone in San Francisco said, oh, I knew they would get a letter because why? They never listened to any of us, or they didn't participate in a task force, or they weren't, party to all of our agreements. No, they're actually picking ones that are in complete compliance and have been actually very healthy and very productive members of this community. So.
But doesn't that show then what the legislators want to do with this bill? If they think, well, it could ultimately not even mean anything if it were passed, doesn't that kind of put a damper on it?
Kind of? Oh, yes, it does. Absolutely puts a damper on that when you have the federal government essentially saying, regardless of what you do, we will continue our efforts. And that has set a tone in Sacramento that is one of the challenges for 2312.
It seems like it would be insurmountable.
No. Absolutely not.
Never.
Hard but not impossible.
That's right. Hard but not impossible. That's the new motto.
Synthetic marijuana.
All right, well, I want to thank Quentin for being here tonight. I know that we have lots more questions, so we're going to try to invite him back later this summer, but thank you for his time.
Thank you.
No synthetic marijuana.
And we'll be touching base with you, Quentin, about that targeted appropriations list.
Absolutely.
Don't
Quentin,
synthetic marijuana.
excuse me, Quentin, can you stay around to answer questions later at the end of the meeting?
I'm actually going to run to another meeting, but
Okay, well, we'll get you back
I will
some other
certainly
time.
come back. I'm more than happy to come back.
Thanks
Tell
again.
Tony we love you. They want us to be on this synthetic marijuana that's on the news.
All right, we're going to move on to now Ed Rosenthal.
Ed!
Anyway, I don't know what I was supposed to talk here about because of short and long-term memory loss. And so I'm just going to open it up to questions like personal questions, questions about cultivation, questions about politics, my personal opinions about things. And I'm sure I have a personal opinion about something even if I don't know anything about it. So, yes, and I'll make one if I don't have one, yes.
How do you feel about what happened at Oaksterdam?
Well, it was shitty, you know?
Really?
It was really shitty, it was terrible. But it was to be expected, and because, you know, when, both with Robert Lee and with Harborside, when you have a situation when they went on TV that the government was put in a Hobson's choice of either, we thought they were in a Hobson's choice, either they'd have to live with it, and if they live with it, there'd be an explosion of dispensaries and, you know, more people doing it even in states that didn't have have medical marijuana. And if they, on the other hand, if they went and they arrested people and just started a trial or something like that, they might not win it because, you know, look what happened with my trial 10 years ago, and people have been much more educated since then, and certainly Harborside and Richard have influenced many more people than I have in a very direct way on a day-to-day basis, you know, since they're selling marijuana directly to people. So, so I think but the government did choose very wisely. They had a third choice. Well, we'll just do a stop and grab and not arrest. So there's no trial. We just ended the situation. He's out of business. Same thing that they did with me, that I was no longer supplying clones. But here's the problem with that. Let 1,000 flowers bloom, and that's, remember what happened with Dennis Perone. They closed Dennis Perone's club, but all the people that Dennis Perone had trained by having worked there, all his employees, many of them went out and started other clubs. So when it's like a metastatic process. When they close this one club, a lot of little clubs will open, and that will be much harder for them to deal with. And also, remember, in Oakland you have Prop Z. So there are already many Prop Z clubs that are informal. Maybe they don't have a sign-up, but people know where to get pot. Yes?
Going back to Melinda Haig and Attorney General Holder.
I'd rather not go back to them.
Well, let me finish my point, please. You know, let's be honest. We have an Attorney General and a President who are black men, and I think it's obvious that in order to assure his reelection, they have to appear tough on crime. I mean, that's all I can, you know, reasonably deduce. But
well, you know what? I'm going to cut you off right there.
NRA.
Because you confuse caste and class. You confuse caste and class. You know, caste is the color that you're born with, or your ethnicity. You know, you can't change that. But you can change class, and you're confusing the two. You see, he rides not with black people or white or poor white people or anything like that. He's riding with rich people. It's rich versus poor. Now, why is he doing it? You're saying, oh, he has to appear tough on crime. No, actually, he's losing votes and he's losing money by doing this. But, well, a lot of rich donors and all of those computer donors who he disdained so much after the election, they're not giving him money. So he's actually losing some money from it. But I don't know exactly what his gain is, and nobody's been able to figure it out. I've been on panels with, you know, like, or listened to panels from Ethan Nadelman on down. Nobody understands why he's doing this. It seems to be against his own self-interest.
Speaking of Obama.
Of Obama, yeah. And it's not coming from Haig because they had the same thing. They're having problems in Colorado. They're having problems in Montana. They had problems in Montana, Michigan. They wrote that letter to Rhode Island. You know, it's all over the country. So it's not like just one rogue or four rogue federal attorneys. It's coming from the top. Yes?
Obama's easy to explain. He's taken more money from pharmaceuticals than George W. Bush, so that explains him. It's all about the money. My question to you, sir.
Well, you know what? Let me just comment on that for 1 second. That could very well be because you know they are trying to make get some of the cannabinoids issued as Schedule II, which would be pharmaceuticals. So then they wouldn't want competition. And you know what? What's really giving them competition is the professionalism of the dispensaries, you know, where they're testing things. They're going to start testing for terpenes. They're testing for pollutants. And they're trying to do some research. You know, they're hiring researchers. They're getting more and more. Excuse me. He still has the floor. More and more professional products. So So I think that's a real threat to the pharmaceutical companies. If they were just selling pot, then it wouldn't be.